Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of seeing how fast I can make my days off fly by. So I really don't know what's going to go on in this video because I don't really have a target. I've been kind of playing around with these axles here, just mostly doing some drawing up brackets and doing some plasma cam work, but nothing that you guys would find interesting just yet. I have not been doing any more tuning as of yet, just a typical northern Nevada spring. We had 60-degree weather a couple of days ago and then snow on the ground yesterday morning. We're back to kind of rainy. Looks like it could rain, kind of cold. The sun has poked its head out just enough to kind of mess up my lighting here apparently. But outside of that, it's just not really, the type of weather that I want to do any tuning for anyway. So what I've decided to do is go ahead and tie up some loose ends. So I've been driving the truck around without any upper radiator mounts. The radiator is mounted at the bottom of the radiator itself in the chassis. It's fairly solid, but definitely not something I want to get too rowdy with. So I need to get some upper radiator mounts back in there just to help stabilize the top of that radiator. So what it had before was a surge tank that I had built last year. And the surge tank bolts to the top of the radiator here. And then it has a couple of turnbuckles that go back to the upper shock mounts. And that just helps stabilize the top of the radiator. Well, when it blew the head gaskets last year in Mountain Home, it turned that big cubic inch supercharged engine into an air compressor for about an instant and tried using my cooling system as air storage. This surge tank here apparently had the most square inches, and it basically just blew it apart from all of that pressure inside of the cooling system as the head gasket let go and basically just pumped a bunch of air into the cooling system. So I was thinking, this is junk. I'll throw that away. I do still have the mounts in the top of the radiator where I could build some new standoffs or something on the top of the radiator and reuse the turnbuckles or build new turnbuckles and still be able to tie into the top of the shock mount. But then I got to thinking, even though I don't really need to run a surge tank, or I don't feel that I need a surge tank anymore, I still could use, just a catch can of some kind. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and just duplicate this part. Only rather than build a surge tank like this one here, where it was actually a pressurized part of the system, I'm just going to make it into a simple catch can. So it'll bolt to the radiator just like this one here. The turnbuckles should fit right in the same place. And instead of being pressurized like this one here, it will just have a fitting in it that goes to the fitting underneath the radiator cap. So as the radiator, the coolant in the radiator heats up and expands, if you don't have a catch can, that just pushes that out onto the ground. Usually not a huge deal. You're going to lose a couple ounces of coolant. As it cools off and works through the cycle, it's just going to find its own level anyway. However, if I do a catch can, I can actually push that coolant up into that reservoir, and as it cools off, it can draw that coolant back into the radiator. So I'm not giving up any capacity, any cooling system capacity for the sake of expansion and contraction of the coolant. I'm just giving this a place to store as it's hot. So that's what I'm going to do is go ahead and duplicate this part, which will be really easy because I did this one here on the CNC router table, cut most all of this stuff out on that table. So I'm just going to go dig that file up. I have enough material left over from the transmission cooler mounts. I should be able to cut most all of this out of that piece and do a little brake work, get it all bent into shape, and just weld it up. Well, I'm going to call that a success. And rather than spend any more time talking about it, I'm going to go get this thing bolted on and be able to check this little tiny item off the list. All right, I got a pocket full of tools. I even knew where most of the parts were, most of the fasteners. So now I guess we can get this thing bolted on, assuming that it still fits, or assuming the new one fits. Also, due to the head gasket failure in the other engine, this radiator took quite a hit. I don't know if you can see it on camera there, but the cooling tubes in here are actually kind of arched now from trying to expand from the pressure in there and not really having anywhere to go. So they're kind of arched up. And then the tanks themselves on each end of the radiator, where they used to be nice and square and, you know, really sharp, crisp edges, are actually kind of bulged out and rounded now. You know, really it was just an effortless modification to get more cooling capacity in this system. I didn't even have to try hard. I went ahead and threw a clear piece of vinyl tube in between the new catch can and the puke fitting on the radiator here. So that's pretty much going to wrap up that project. And that's pretty much all I'm going to complete this week, apparently, on small projects. I kind of got sidetracked back to working on these things. So I've been rolling around on the floor over here with my straight edge and my square and a tape measure, a little bit of soapstone, and just been pulling different dimensions off of existing mounts on the axle techs here. I've got shock mounts, anti-roll bar mounts, link mounts, limit strap mounts, all kinds of different locations and whatnot. I'm just trying to get that information so I can plug it into a plasma cam drawing and start designing all of those different mounting locations to fit on these axles here. So that's what I've been focusing on the rest of this week, is just getting all of the stuff designed so that I can get these axles under the truck. If we come over here, I can show you how I've been, you know, pulling dimensions off of these housings. You can see I've just got a piece of flat bar here, and it's sitting in the location of where one web of my truss is going to be on these housings. So it's going to be trussed all the way across, and it's going to come down clear out here to the flange to make this axle stronger, the housing itself much stronger. So as you can see, I've taken this flat bar and I have marked it every 1/2 of an inch. Got a little black dot there. So what I've done is come off every 1/2 inch and pull a measurement off of this edge back here back to the housing itself. And as I pull each dimension, I transfer it over here just to a piece of paper. Each one of these hash marks represents that dimension. So here's the center line. The first mark is 0. It's basically touching. I'm not going to worry about a couple thousandths, and then progressively work our way towards the flange. And I used those measurements documented here. This top row is one side of the housing here. That side of the housing over here is this second row coming back across. How I laid that out isn't important. It's just important that you get the right measurement in the right location. So I've taken this, all of these measurements in here on the computer, and each one of these measurements here is a line right here. I just put a set of 1/2 inch spaces and lines and put that measurement in, and as you can see, you're just creating that profile of that axle housing. Now this isn't something that you are limited to using, here on the computer. You could actually use this technique and, just draw the same lines and transfer that profile onto your plate and cut it out with a torch or with your hand plasma cutter, or even do it on a piece of poster board and then proof fit that to the axle housing, and then you would have a poster board pattern that you could transfer to your plate. For me, this is just an easy way of getting it on the computer, and then I'm actually looking at the profile of that housing. Now that I have this profile here in the computer, I can go in and connect the ends of each one of these lines, and you have an even better profile of that axle housing. And then I can use that to start designing my truss itself. So that's what I've been working on, and that's what I'm going to continue to work on. I need to get this housing rolled up 90 degrees so I can do the same technique here and get the profile of this bowl here, because the front face of that axle is also going to get trussed both ways to strengthen it in that plane. Also, next week, we're going to be taking this thing to the local all clubs meet. Basically, it's just a spring get-together where all the motorsports groups can bring their projects out or their show cars, whatever genre of motorsport they're into. You're free to bring your rig down, kind of, get out of the shop, get out of the house after a long winter. So we're going to be cleaning this thing up. I've got some friends that are coming in from out of town, going to give me a hand washing all the blown head gasketness, engine swap grime, everything that's on there. Get it all spiffed up and looking good. Another really cool thing is my wife is going to drag my Cummins powered 79 Ford Super Cab out of the garage.
Sounds like pretty good.
And get it all cleaned up, and she's going to take it to the all clubs meet as well. So that's going to be really cool to see these two trucks sitting down there on the floor together. They're never even on the same block, let alone in the same room. So that should be pretty cool. Maybe I'll see if I can get a little bit of content of that weekend and post it up as well. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up here. I know it's not the best video for content, but I had already recorded all of the footage, building the catch can and all that crap. So I figured I'd just as well post it up rather than throw it away. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good one. The love of peace.